From corner of the state to corner of the state and all the way across, the Cy-Hawk Trophy always means something, but nationally, it's a big deal like never before. Iowa State, game of the day on Saturday across the nation in college football. Welcome into our live preview show. Iowa State Hawkeyes and Cyclones get together, and they get together right here at the Voice of College Football. So leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics, although they've got the debate topics lined up themselves. But if you can bring a few more to the table, that would be exceptional as well. We got Corey Brada on the line, of course, from the Hawkeye of the Storm, as well as Levi Stevenson. You can catch him on SB Nation's Wide Right Natty Light. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight, at least at this point?
No hurt feelings yet, Mark. We're early, so we've got plenty of time to rile things up. Let's go.
And as always, it's still a good day to be a Cyclone, Mark.
And it is good to have both of you on here. I get the fun role here because I just get to wind you two up and kick back and let her ride. So the way this is going to work best is for me just to probably just throw out a topic, a subject, and I don't think I'm going to have to say anything for the next, who knows, 4 or 5 hours. Again, I will monitor the live chat. So if there's anything really good, we will certainly bring that to Corey and to Levi. Levi, I've been talking to Corey quite a bit here recently. We'll start with you. What makes this one so special? It's a generic question, but I think you're going to be able to give it a good spin.
Yeah. So, I mean, to the folks of Iowa, it is another Cy-Hawk game. I mean, it's always special to us, but what makes it a big deal now is that it's kind of a generic answer, but it is because they're both in the top 10. It's not just the first ranked Cy-Hawk game ever where they're both ranked, but they're both in the top 10. They're both really good teams. One in red's a little bit better, but that's okay. And it's just you get game day coming. That's adding to this whole thing, which is kind of funny because we're a little bit conflicted on the whole ESPN game day thing after this all Big 12 realignment thing. We're like, game day, yeah. But it shows the growth of the rivalry and the nationalized too, that they've put game day essentially at 2 consecutive Cy-Hawk games because they didn't play last year. So they've two Cy-Hawk games in a row game day is at. And that shows you where the national attention is now on this game, where it used to just be like, I would say like, it's just fun, like meme football game that happens in September. And it still kind of is, but now it's just fun. And it actually matters now, because at least one team, it probably, potentially both, just depending on everything shake out, would be like potentially using this as a part of a playoff resume too. So it goes beyond that, where it's not just a game that happens in September, but it can really set the tone for the rest of your season and for the rest of both. And then we can also shit talk Iowa when they lose on Saturday. So.
Did he just say potentially one of these teams is using this for a playoff resume? I don't know. I mean, I think Iowa State could make the playoff if they were to, win every game. Don't discount your own team, Levi.
Well, you see, the problem is I'm not sure they let teams in the playoff that have a broken jugs machine for a quarterback. So I'm not sure that that's going to jive super well.
All right, listen, I made it clear. We talked before we came on here. If the claws come out tonight, that's all right. We take nothing personally.
It's
here
good time. We're here for football. A good time.
Yeah. So my major storylines going into this, Mark. Obviously, like Levi said, game day's here. I'm excited about it. I think it's great for college football. And just so everybody knows, I'm a homer as much as any Hawkeye fan is. But if you watch my prediction on my podcast, which will be released later on this evening, I'm not going to give anything away, but I'll just say I'm not a homer. All right. So just stick with that and then watch my show later. But I think game day being here, I think it's going to be kind of an interesting environment. Last time Iowa was here, you had the altercation with the band and the fans. And just for the record, Levi, I'm not one-sided on that. I thought the Iowa band completely instigated that. I mean, if you watch the tape, that's clear.
Yeah, that was a weird situation. that was a whole deal.
I think we can all agree that just because the band is marching through you and blowing their trumpets and their horns, that does not give you an excuse for beating the crap out of them.
Sure, no. Someone being addicted doesn't mean they can just punch you in the face, but it's it's kind of two sides of the same coin on that one. I don't know. That one's just a really That was a really weird situation.
It was, but I think just everything last 2 years ago, the delays. I think that game went over 6 hours long. I mean, I know people who are Iowa State season ticket holders that went home and never came back and then missed the end of the game. Which, if you're a Cyclone fan, you're probably happy you missed the end of the game. But I want to divert this kind of back to an appearance you made, Levi, back in what was it, probably like May or something. And you were running through the Iowa, and this is just because I did my research. I'm not like, lobbying for Iowa State quotes, but back in, May or June, you were on this show with Mark Rogers himself, voice of college football, and you were running through the Iowa State schedule. And I swear you spent like 5 minutes talking about, UNI, they're extremely valuable win on the schedule. They're respected across the country. And then you got to Iowa and you're like, people kind of respect him, but not really. And I'm just like, I'm watching this and I'm like, he's being serious. He's being legitimate. I'm like, I could not believe it. And so I will throw that out now. I thought it was hilarious. If you're an Iowa fan, if you want to, get your blood boiling, go back and watch Levi's appearance a few months ago on the show.
You know what? But was I wrong about the UNI thing?
No, well, you say it's a valuable game on the schedule. It's I think you and I both know it's not a valuable game.
I'd have to go back and look at the. I'd have to go look at the verbatim what I actually said verbatim. But
yeah, you and I both know it's not a valuable game on the schedule.
No, yeah, not from a national perspective. No, you're right.
No, I mean
it's a valuable game for Iowa State because it helps us kind of get a barometer of where our fundamentals and stuff like that, where the base personnel is, what the lines look like, stuff like that. Because Iowa fans are well familiar as well. You do not mess around with UNI.
I totally. I mean, I remember 2009, the 2 block kicks in Kinnick. I get it. That is a game that Iowa has dropped. I wish they still played it, but it is a lose-lose. I mean, Iowa State's had their fair share of trouble with North Dakota State. Iowa lost to North Dakota State in 2016. Those are never good scenarios because you gain nothing from them. And I'll ask you first: how were you feeling last week? Because on our post-game show for Iowa, Indiana, we had former Iowa assistant coach John Patterson on, and he was talking about the 16-10. Iowa State win over UNI, and he sort of just dismissed it as being a vanilla. He didn't watch it, but he was assuming it was a vanilla call game from Campbell. You and I had a chance to win the game the last drive, correct? I mean, how are you feeling post game?
Well, yes and no. I mean, they did technically by the scoreline. Yes. I will say in the game, I was collapsing in on myself saying, "Oh my God, we suck. What the hell's going on?" But after the game, after I went and watched it, I mean, even in the game, like as much as miserable as I was at the time about how the offense was playing, the defense was lights out. And UNI didn't cross into, they didn't make it into the red zone the entire game. And they only crossed the 50 like 3 or 4 times or something like that. And one of them was like to the 49. Or something like that. I mean, the UNI's offense was doing nothing at all. And I think I don't know what the percentage was, but like a good chunk of their yards for the whole game came on that last drive when Iowa State was playing prevent. So I never felt like we were in danger of losing the game because the defense was so good.
So my question is then to you, and again, I'm not saying one way or the other, but it is a question to you. Should Iowa State fans be concerned that an offense which features arguably the best tight end in the country in Charlie Kolar, which I get wasn't playing on Saturday, but you've got Chase Allen behind him, correct? That was what he was playing Saturday. Yep. You've got arguably the best running back in the country in Breece Hall. You've got a veteran quarterback in Brock Purdy. You've got a guy who's playing at linebacker who seems like he's been here since the 90s in Mike Rose. And yet I get that's defense, but I'm saying the offense can't pull away from an FCS opponent. I mean, I get it. It was a vanilla call game from Campbell, but should that be a concern for Cyclone fans?
I think that was a game where it's one of those. It's never as bad as it's never as bad as it seems. So if in the moment and during the game, I was like, this is not good. Like this doesn't look good at all. But after I went and rewatched the games, there was a few things that I noticed. For one, there was a couple kind of like weird little things that happened that killed some drives. Like one of them, Tariq Milton slipped while he was turning on a screen that would have been for a first down, but he slipped. And then there was another one that Joe Skates caught it and then it was punched out or something he caught it and then it popped out and went backwards like 8 yards and they ruled it a fumble and that Iowa State had recovered, but they didn't review it for whatever reason, even though it was pretty obviously an incompletion, and it should have been ruled an incompletion. So instead of 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 5 or whatever it would have been, it was 2nd and 15. And that was a huge, that killed that drive. Tariq Milton's slip killed that drive. Jalen Noel's little punch that went out of freak punch fumble that went out of bounds, wherever, that one kind of killed that drive. So even if you only take 2 of those and say Iowa State goes down and score of those, now you're at 30-10, which is a very different looking score line. And the offensive line wasn't as good as we thought they were going to be. Worth noting that they had Trevor Downing back, who didn't play all last year, so they still need time to gel. And offensive lines especially take the jump from week 1 to week 2, and it tracks extremely well under Matt Campbell. Week 1 to week 2, the offensive line usually proves dramatically because they've got some tape against people that are actually trying to beat them, and they don't already know what they're doing. They've got tape on that now. So Brees Hall kind of did what he could with what room he had. He didn't have a lot of room. He did what he could. They used him in the passing game, got him some receptions in the passing game, which was good. But the things that I was looking for, the one thing that I was really curious to watch, because it happened the last 2 seasons, which is part of Iowa State's rough starts, was that Brock Purdy was generally not good at all the last 2 season openers. This one, Brock was good. He was downright good. He was 78% passing. Didn't throw an interception. Never even looked like he was close to throwing an interception. There was no bad reads. There was no taking unnecessary gambles. He didn't have a ton of yards because they threw some shorter routes with Xavier Hutchinson and Tariq Milton and the screens underneath and stuff like that. But he was really efficient. He ran when he needed to. He stood in the pocket when he needed to. That was a really, really clean game for Brock, which was a really nice thing to see in a season opener. So I kind of actually got what I wanted to see out of that from that perspective, as far as what the prospectus looks like going forward. I know the offensive line is going to be there. Brees is going to be there. Charlie Kohler didn't play, which is a really, really important thing. He's the best tight end in the country. And when you lose that receiving threat, plus also in Iowa State's offense too, he has a similar effect to what Steph Curry does with the Warriors, where he doesn't actually have to have the ball in his hands or Klay Thompson actually might be a better analogy, where he doesn't actually have to have the ball in his hands for the defense to really have to pay attention and to dedicate a lot of attention to him. And when you have Charlie Kohler in there, even if it's a running play, you have to almost keep a linebacker out there because there's enough film on it. You have to keep a linebacker back there in case he slips out on an RPO. Because he's done that and he's punished. Texas Tech has had a lot of trouble defending that against Charlie Kohler. So he commands attention from at least 1 or 2 individual players on the defense, and that changes your spacing. That changes who can play in the box and who can't. That changes a lot of different things. So having Charlie Kohler back is another huge, huge reason that Iowa State's result last weekend did not change my opinion about it. Well, actually, either result last weekend did not change my opinion about the game this weekend.
I agree. I totally agree. If people watched my season preview, I'm sticking with the same winner of this game. And again, you'll have to go back and watch that if you want to know who I'm picking. But I'm picking the same winner, and you may be surprised at who I'm picking. But with that being said, I remember a year ago, and of course, I'm not an ESPN Plus subscriber because Iowa gets all its games televised, Levi. So you'll have to fill me in on the gaps here. But I know a year ago, Louisiana Lafayette really took advantage of Iowa State and special teams. I'm assuming Campbell has cleaned that up. Obviously, Iowa fans know that those struggles were also prevalent in 2019 with the running into your own man, which kind of fumbled away the game for Iowa against Iowa. So did that clean up, I guess, for Iowa State?
Parts of it have. So one of the big things and one of the huge problem was with that, and what kind of went underrated last year, was that Iowa State was definitely dead last in the Power 5, and actually one of the worst in the FBS at touchbacks on kickoffs. They were 13%, just almost nothing. Well, they have Andrew Mevis now, who put his first kickoff went to the 5-yard line, but every single other one of them after that went out of the back of the end zone. So he was at 80% touchbacks the last game, and he looks like he can do that consistently. So if you remember, Louisiana at least was 2 of their touchdowns were on special teams, and one of them, at least, I can't remember if both of them were kick returns or one of them was a kick return, but at least one of them was a kick return. You can eliminate that entirely by just kicking out of the back of the end zone. It seems like a really simple fix, but if you can just eliminate kick returns altogether, you eliminate that entire mode of scoring for the other team, which is a problem that Iowa State has had, because when you have to cover every single kickoff, eventually you're going to give one up. And last year that one, Louisiana turned out to be a good team. We don't need to like kind of rehash that whole thing, but like the special teams was an issue. Mevis fixes a lot of that with the kickoffs and by being able to actually rack up touchbacks on an extremely consistent basis. And he actually took a long field goal last week too and drained it, and it looked really good. He had a lot of space left. He could have made it from 55 or 60 if he really wanted to with the leg he put that on that kick. So I would say it's got a short kicker in Connor Sally still, letting him really hone in on the short distances where he's good. And then letting Andrew Mevis take the long ones. And I feel really good about the kicking game right now. Punting game, not as confident. Corey Dunn is fine. He's not going to be like, I mean, he's got the leg, and we've seen it like a couple times that he can, like, when he gets a good hold of one, he can be a really good punter. But he is really inconsistent, and it is a bit worrying for me, especially going into a game where a lot of people, and kind of myself, are expecting a pretty defensive game, lots of punting, things like that.
And don't forget who you're punting to. I mean, maybe Iowa State fans don't know who Charlie Jones is, but
I think they do now. Yeah, after last week.
And now, of course, he got dinged up a little bit last week against Indiana. I think, according to Kirk Ferentz, he's fine. He's good to go. He's practicing, so that's good news. But he is a dangerous guy and a guy who can be a difference maker, not only on special teams, or excuse me, with punt returning, but also with kick returning.
Yeah, and the punt coverage unit doesn't worry me. Like, I'm not worried. Like, not to say that I'm not ever worried about it, but like I'm not as worried about Charlie Jones doing some damage on the punt coverage, because the punt coverage team has always been really good. What I'm worried about is literally like shanking punts out and
which is what Indiana did. That's exactly
and giving
what
Iowa
Indiana
the ball
did.
at like the 40-yard line. Like that. I mean, that is a legitimate concern of mine. Where you could end up giving Iowa good field position without them ever having to touch the ball. That is a concern of mine. If Corey is even fine on Saturday, it doesn't have to have any boomers, but if he doesn't shank something, I'll feel a lot better, and that can kind of hide that weak spot. So that's a little bit of a concern. But as far as like our return games and stuff like that, I mean, I don't know. Kick returns are so infrequent anymore. Like actual kick returns are so infrequent anymore that I don't know. Iowa State doesn't really return that many kicks. And even punt returns, they typically usually just fair catch them and go on offense. So it's kind of like they'll do it if they can, but it's not really a huge part of Iowa State's game plan necessarily.
Mark, while I have this on my mind, I want to vent a little about a little something, and keep in mind that I'm a guy I've lived in Ames for 6 years. I'm happy to call this home. I really get tired, and I'm the biggest, again, homer Hawk fan that you're going to meet. I promise you that. All right. But I really do get tired of this hate week crap that I keep hearing. I get tired of Iowa State fans. I get tired of Iowa fans. I get tired of the stoking of the fire. I got tired of hearing Tyler Goodson, and I'm sure Iowa State fans heard it this week when he said it was their Super Bowl.
Sure,
I don't know why you got to say that. I really don't know why you're providing bulletin board material for one of the best coaches.
Which is what it is. That's what it is.
What it is. I mean, and there's no beating around the bush on this. That's what it is. You're providing bulletin board material for the other team. I don't get it. Fans
even Kirk Ferentz was like, no. Like, I mean, I guess I hope he's right, but he's not. Like,
look, if you're confident, that's great. You got swagger. Yeah. I'm all about trash talking after the fact. But to me, as a player, like, I just don't get why you do that. The other thing about it is, I hear Iowa fans on Twitter this week saying, Iowa's going to win by 30. We had a comment here just a little bit ago, Iowa State, won by 6 to an FCS team. We blew out number 7. That doesn't mean anything. All right. College football, first of all, it's week 1. Right. And as we know, Iowa State has a reputation of looking like a totally different team week 1 to week 2. Iowa does to a degree, but I feel like that's more of an Iowa State thing than an Iowa thing. I think it's a little bit overrated in Iowa City. And the score, if you look at the score and you listen to our postgame show with Don Patterson Saturday, the score of the Iowa game Saturday was a bit deceiving. Because
that it was. Yeah.
You cannot count, and I'll rehash this. I've rehashed it before. I'll say it again. You cannot count on multiple pick sixes. Okay.
You can't even count on one.
Right. By the same player. You can't count on probably 3 interceptions. Probably, I don't really know. Maybe you get 3 turnovers against a Kent State and Colorado State, but that's quite an accomplishment at this level. You're not going to be able to rely on that. And let's be honest, Michael Penix was a shell of himself.
I've always thought Michael Penix is like, he's a good runner, he's a good athlete and stuff like that.
He didn't run at all though. He didn't run.
Yeah, right. And as a passer, I've always thought he's pretty mediocre or maybe just slightly above average.
I think I don't think he's comfortable yet. But here's the deal. I think he allowed the crowd. The crowd was electric Saturday in Iowa City, and I think he really got rattled early, and it snowballed. I mean, that happens. And so you look at Iowa's offense. You've got you've got 2 pick sixes. So there's 14 points. You've got one 56-yard burst from Goodson. There's your 21 points. You've got 2 kicks from Caleb Shudak. If I'm doing my math right, that's 27. And the other one was the QB draw. That was a good drive, but it was a short field.
Sure.
So I want to pump the brakes on Iowa fans, and I think a lot of Iowa fans are in their right mind on this. That this is not. I don't know how Iowa fans could possibly think this, but this is not an obvious. Oh, Iowa's going to win this game hands down. I just don't get how Iowa fans who've been watching the game of college football for as many years. I know a lot of Iowa fans who are very educated, and I get they get caught up in the emotion. They get caught up in the rivalry. But I was just not impressed. Now, what did you call Petrus earlier? You said something. You called
it was a broken jugs machine.
Say that again.
A broken jugs machine. But to be fair, that line is actually taken from Chris Hassel, who works for CBS. He's a big time Hawk fan.
I know.
He called Spencer Petrus a broken jugs machine.
Yeah, well, nobody cares about Chris Hassel. Okay, let's just establish that right off the bat.
I like that quote though. I'm
sure you like the quote.
I'm a big fan of that quote.
I think a lot of Iowa fans have sort of tossed Chris Hassel to the side. No offense to him. But we liked him back during his Nebraska Cornhusker days or Cornholer days.
When he was on.
But ever since he went to ESPN and CBS, he's sort of lost me. But Petrus hasn't played well. You've got a situation where he's never played in front of a crowd. That's something to monitor. Now, he did look more comfortable Saturday. I said that during my podcast this week as well. He looked more comfortable. He looked like he had a better command of the offense. I still think he's missing receivers down the field. It's hard to tell because I wasn't at the game Saturday, but it looks like he's getting rid of the ball when he can. And this is something Don said as well. When he has an opportunity to pick up 3-4 yards, I don't want to say panicking, but he's opting to throw the ball away and he's wasting downs. So there was some improvement, but he's not there yet. I do wonder about the crowd is going to be ridiculous on
There's a
Saturday.
couple things
I love
with
Jack
Petrus.
Price.
There's a couple things with Petrus specifically that if I was an Iowa fan as an Iowa State fan, I'm looking like this is a place thing you can just play. The crowd is definitely. I mean, it's not just a crowd; it's a very hostile crowd. It's a loud crowd. It's his first true road game with an actual crowd,
right?
And it's not just any crowd; it's Iowa State, and
they're rabid fans. Yeah,
but then also part of the rivalry, too. It's going to be there's more fervor to it. Two, you look last week too, he was 13 of 27 passing. Does that sound right? 13 of 27 passing against. I mean, Indiana's defense is good, but I would argue that they're not really in the same conversation as Iowa State's defense.
The secondary I think is good. That's the first thing. So that makes a difference. I'm not making excuse for Spencer, but he did have several drops. I know Sam Laporta had at least 1 or 2. I know Jackson Ritter had at least 1. There were drops to go around. And you could also say that potentially there was some vanilla in the offensive play calling.
Sure. Yeah.
But that doesn't excuse that does not excuse, there was an overthrow to Tyler Goodson on basically a wheel route out of the backfield that was just egregious. There were some of those, but there were more last year against Purdue. So in the season opener last year. So he has improved in certain regards, but let's be completely honest. Brock Purdy hasn't been that great against Iowa. So
he's only played him once, and he was good against. He was good again in 2019. He's only played him once,
but you guys scored 17 points. I
mean,
but I wouldn't say that's good.
Yes.
He had 2 big, and they were off 2 big
he also
plays.
Had the last possession was taken away from him. I mean,
we're judging what he did though. He had 2 big plays down the field. One on a trick play on a freshman cornerback who, I give Campbell credit for taking advantage of the situation, but on a freshman corner, right? Because Iowa was down a man at corner, they get the fake played to what's the guy the big receiver for Iowa State that caught.
Well, he was Michael Petway was the receiver on that.
Yeah. And then the guy that you guys still have, the speedster,
Tariq Milton. Yeah, Tariq Milton.
Caught the other one. I give you guys credit for that, but I'm just saying those were the only 2 big plays that I really remember. He did have a costly fumble, as I recall. Jaimin Colbert punched one out in that game.
Yes, he did.
So I'm not saying, and you're right. They've only had the one matchup, but that was
worth noting too is who else didn't play that game? Breece Hall. Brees Hall was not playing yet when last time they played Iowa. You had the weird game with the weather. And I think everybody watching up until that last play, up until that muff punt, like I know everybody in the stadium was thinking like Iowa State's going to go down and score, because they were, especially the last, like the fourth quarter and the last part of the third quarter, they were just tearing through Iowa's defense. I mean, they were picking up chunk yardage. They were just tearing it apart. And I thought, I was don't know
about tearing it apart.
Oh, I think they were. But anyways,
get Mark. I was a voice of reason in here, tearing it apart, and you scored.
This is Cyhawk. This is no place for a voice of reason.
Yeah, that's true. You're right on that. I'll give you that.
But anyways, I know a lot of people were very confident that Iowa State was going to go down and drive that. There was a lot of Iowa fans I've talked to thought they were.
Well, yeah, but it didn't happen. So
sure, that's right. But those are not Brock Purdy's fault. But anyways,
okay.
Iowa's only played him once. They have really essentially not played Brees Hall yet.
Hold on a second. That's like saying if I hadn't married my wife that I would have married Jessica Simpson. We don't know because she wasn't interested and I wasn't interested. That doesn't mean I would have had I been interested.
All right, but that doesn't change that they've only played Brock once. They've only played Brock once. That's a fact. That is an objective fact.
That is a fact. But you're saying, okay. Well, you can't. You're saying Brock didn't get an opportunity. Had he
on the last drive,
opportunity, he would have taken it. We don't know that.
We don't know.
Hypothetical.
You are correct. Anyways,
all right.
This 2021 team is the offensive line is eons better. The 2021 team is dramatically better than the 2019 team. It just is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, absolutely should be. No, there's no question.
Yeah. I mean, all of the people that are back are better. Offensive line is so much better. You actually have Brees Hall now instead of Sheldon Croney, I think was the start of that game. And I have doubts on what Iowa's offense looks like in this, though, because outside of that 53-yard run or whatever, 52 or 53 or whatever it was, I would average like 3 yards a carry on the ground. Three Iowa, 3 yards a carry.
Down your starting guard, that's the first thing. Lost your starting left tackle of 4 years in Alaric Jackson. You lost your right tackle in Mark
Are they
Callenberg.
playing now? Is Alaric Jackson playing
No,
next
but I'm
week?
just saying it's game one. For a bunch of young guys,
yes,
you've got a new left tackle, you got a new right tackle, and you've got a new right guard.
Yep.
A new left
How
guard.
do you feel about that left tackle going up against Will McDonald?
I think Mason Richmond, here's the deal. All right. I don't feel good about it. But I feel better about pressure coming from the outside as opposed to pressure coming from the inside. I'm more comfortable. Obviously, I could ask you whoever your tackles are. I could ask you how you feel about them going up against Tyler Linderbaum. But again, I would rather pressure coming up from the outsides than I would on the insides, especially for a guy like Petrus who can at least scoot forward in the pocket and make a throw. I tell you, if Iowa had the guard issues that they had in 2019, and I'm honestly surprised that Iowa State wasn't able to take advantage of it more in that game, because later on, Michigan, Penn State, Iowa had problems up the middle all season, and they've kind of shored those problems up. If that had happened with a guy like Petrus, who's even more of a statue than Stanley, I would be very, very concerned. Now, I'm concerned. There's no question about it. I look up and down Iowa State's roster. It's not just defensive line. I don't know that I've ever seen, I don't know. You probably know because you're in Iowa State, everything, but is there data that is indicative or excuse me, that indicates Iowa's age? Because I have not, when I look up and down Iowa State's depth chart, everybody's a senior. I've never seen a roster like this.
Iowa State is a crazy old, it's a crazy experience.
I'm serious, Mark. I'm not exaggerating this. You need to look at Iowa State's depth chart.
Iowa State
is ridiculous.
Maybe one of the oldest teams in college football. They have a ton of experience, and Will McDonald has never started a game.
And yet Iowa State fans make fun of Jordan Bohannon because he's been at Iowa for 6 years. It's just,
that's not the only reason we make fun of Jordan Bohannon, to be fair.
I agree with that. We won't get. We can have a whole different show on that.
Fair enough.
This is the voice of college football.
But this kind of does still tie back into my last concern with Petrus, though, is he's going against John Hickok's 3-3-5, which he has not seen and he's never going to see again in the Big Ten. It's a completely new system with lots of zones. There's random blitzers coming from all over the place. That's really hard to identify. When you have a guy that's really young and has never played against that, John Hickok has swallowed up many a better quarterback than Spencer Petrus. Spencer Rattler had a bad time. Kyler Murray even struggled a little bit. Baker Mayfield had his troubles. Jalen Hurts. I mean, lots of better quarterbacks than Spencer Petras have struggled against John Hickok. And that's certainly not to say that he is incapable of moving the ball. That's not what I'm saying at all. And they probably will get yards. Just they tighten up quite a bit in the red zone. But you have a team like that plays a totally unique defense that Spencer Petras has never seen and won't see again until next year. And that would, to me, that is a decided advantage for Iowa State from just from that particular zone of context, as far as Spencer Petras having to figure out the 3-3-5 or 3-2-6 or whatever they decide to make it, with all these crazy edge blitzers and these really exotic blitz packages coming from everywhere. You got corner blitzes coming from different places.
Let's remember that Iowa has, for years had to face Don Brown's defense at Michigan, which really sent. It's not the same, I get it, but sort of a similar. You never know where pressure is coming from.
Sure,
I will say this is something that is a note, and it was a text message that I got from Coach Don Patterson on, was it Tuesday of this week, and he had mentioned John Heacock. So he was head coach. Don was head coach at Western Illinois when John was head coach at Youngstown.
Yep.
So Don has a really strong connection to John Heacock. So I would not be surprised. I mean, obviously, these guys have the tape out the wazoo.
Sure.
And Kirk is familiar with John Heacock now, but I would not be surprised if Don Patterson, he'll never tell us, but I would not be surprised if he's kind of helping Kirk out, helping the offensive line out this week. But I agree. Pressure, it's the offensive line is a concern of mine. It was a concern before the season started. I keep reiterating this. It concerns me that Kirk Ferentz is rotating 6, 7, 8 guys at offensive line, because that's not a Kirk Ferentz thing to do.
Yeah, you're not creating continuity doing that, and it gets hard to sustain that.
The defensive line is different. Like if Iowa can get 6, 7, 8 guys on the defensive line, I'm
defensive line's totally. If you keep guys fresh, Iowa State does that all the time too, where you're rotating basically 2 starting defensive lines. Yeah,
but it's a concern. Again, I know part of it is because Kyler Schott's out. You're right; he will not be back this Saturday. But between Connor Colby and Mason Richmond and Jack Plum and Nick DeYoung and Justin Britt and Cody Ince, you just got so many bodies. And I agree with you. Continuity is an issue. And I think a big part of it is how can you get your backs to block effectively? I mean, that because Tyler Goodson's proven. Irie Kelly Martin's an experienced guy who's dealt with a lot of injuries, but is a veteran. He's been to Ames. He knows what it's all about. So I think I'm certainly concerned with Iowa moving the ball consistently, because they weren't able to do it against an average defensive line for Indiana. And I think most people besides Jim Coyle would agree that it's an average defensive line at Indiana this year.
Sure.
I think, and I don't know if we want to transition this conversation over, Levi, but I think it's a fair topic to bring up how Iowa State's going to move the ball against Iowa's defense, because I get it. Penix didn't look good last week.
Sure.
I get it. You've got Breece Hall. You've got a senior-laden team. You've got Milton. You've got Hutchinson. You've got all these guys. Kolar. You've got Allen. I get it. But let's remember about the whole tight end thing. Iowa's tight end you. I'm sure you don't agree with that, but they are tight end you. And so Iowa's used. You're going to have some years to make up here.
In the last 5 years, right?
Well, I mean,
we're restricting that to the last 5 years.
Before that, it's probably Miami.
Miami?
Yeah.
Come on, Mark.
Notre Dame kicks out some tight ends.
Dallas Clark, Tony Moyaki, Brandon Myers.
You dropped a bit off the cliff after Clark. The Miami list would be mighty impressive.
Tony Moyaki dealt with a lot of injuries once he made it to the next level, was successful in Kansas City when he was healthy. All right. Brandon Myers was a starter in Tampa Bay for many seasons.
Who?
Well, you say who all you want. You look him up. Go look him up.
I'm just messing.
I mean, listen, obviously Kittle Hawkinson fan, but come on, this stretches back into the
Iowa being tight end you over the last 5 years doesn't change the fact that Iowa State's tight end room and now
over the last 5 years, though, that's ridiculous.
Right, but are we playing this game over 5 years? Or are we playing this game on Saturday?
Well, we're playing it over
on Saturday. Who's got the better tight end?
Okay, that's not.
Say
we're
it.
Not talking,
say it out loud. Say it.
Well,
who's got the better tight ends? Who's got the better tight ends?
The better tight ends collectively, Iowa State.
Yes, yes, you do.
Hold on a second. I am not going to sit here and let you trounce all over Sam Laporta. Okay,
I'm not saying he's bad. I'm saying he's one dude.
Yeah, but I'm just saying we're talking tight end. Listen, I've got written down here tight end 1 versus tight end 1 is one of my matchups to watch, because I do think it's very even. Like Kolar's coming off of an injury, and Sam Laporta hasn't really. He hasn't played against Iowa State, so Iowa State fans don't know what to expect with Sam.
It's an Iowa tight end. They all do the same exact thing.
Okay, but my point is, if Iowa's been tight, even if it is the last 5 years, Iowa knows how to defend multiple tight end sets. All right, They do it every day in practice. Sure. So, do I think it's Yeah, it's a great unit for Iowa State. But am I really? That's not my biggest worry because I think Phil Parker knows what he's doing.
Defending. Yeah, I'm not saying like I mean Iowa State Iowa has been a solid defensive team for a long. There's a reason they've been a good defensive team for a long. I don't think anybody's underestimating Iowa's defense. Like I don't think anybody's like saying they aren't good. I mean they obviously are.
They're really. I think they're really good this year.
I think Iowa State and Iowa are both equally like I think they're both right in the same tier as far as like you have like the blue blood defenses and then maybe like the next tier down is Iowa State and Iowa and probably a couple others, something like that. They do things differently. Whereas Iowa runs their 4-3, they really pack the box. They do lots of different stuff like that. Where Iowa State will let up some yards, but they really lock down in the red zone. So they play defense differently, and their stats look a little bit different. But they still accomplish the same thing against who they need to play. So yeah, I don't think anybody is discounting the Iowa defense as a quality of a unit. But the way I'm kind of contextualizing this though is I'm looking at Iowa's offense versus Iowa State's defense in comparison to Iowa State's offense versus Iowa's defense, and I think it's fairly clear on paper and on film that Iowa State's offense has a higher ceiling, but based on the veteran quarterback that can move, that is accurate downfield, that makes play, that is a playmaker.
So quarterback, the quarterback. So
quarterback, Iowa State's got the advantage. Breece Hall, I would give a slight bump over Tyler Goodson.
Okay, maybe slight, but you're grasping.
He's not.
This is remember Tyler Goodson was the first team All Big Ten running back last year.
And Breece Hall was a first team All American. So
I get it, but I'm just saying like I think when you get to this,
Tyler Goodson's good. Breece Hall is a little bit better. Charlie Kohler is better than Iowa's tight ends.
All of them. He's better than all of them.
Yes, he's better than the best one, so therefore he is better than all of them. That is how math works. I know you guys don't do a lot of math at Iowa, but that's how it works.
Yeah.
Iowa State's offensive line is probably better than Iowa's right now. By the end of the season, we'll see. But personnel-wise, experience-wise, they just probably are right now. Iowa State's defensive line is probably better. The linebackers are probably better. The backs, if you want to take like
who's defensive line?
They're probably pretty close. Iowa State's got the better individual players.
Did you just say Iowa State's linebacking core or Mike Rose by himself?
All three of them are. The linebacking group is objectively better.
You really don't know anything about Iowa, do you, Levi?
I know Jack Campbell.
Did you watch the game this past
Saturday?
Did you watch Justin Jacobs? Did you watch Seth Benson?
Did you watch Jake Hummel? Did you watch Ryan Vance? Why don't you just keep naming names, man? We can keep doing this all day. Iowa State's there's by every metric. Iowa State's linebacker
by every metric. Coaching, fan base.
I didn't realize there was a reason I left, and then I reemerged in the middle of you two to try to at least symbolically to separate you two. But I didn't know that I needed to watch both games play by play and then do my research so I could actually mediate.
This is what. Let me just say this. First of all, I love your work, Levi. I think you do a great job, and I think you're great with. I think you guys all over at SB Nation are great with. Kind of riling, throwing fuel to the fire, so to speak. All right, and that's fine. I it's the business. I get it. But here's what's one thing that Levi's very good at doing, Mark. All right, and this is credit to him. This is a disclaimer. All right, for anybody who's an Iowa fan who's going over to his stuff, he loves to sort of, in a very respectful and side glanced way of kind of taking shots at Iowa, like. He just runs by the linebackers. Yeah, Iowa State got linebacker better. Yep. He did the same thing with the whole UNI Iowa thing earlier. We brought up that in the scheduled discussion that he had months ago with you, Mark. I'm trying to think. He did the same thing calling, what'd you call Petrus again?
A broken jugs machine.
Yeah, it's just, you just add these little things in there. And listen, it doesn't make me upset. It just makes me laugh.
I got to throw my body shots in there, man. I got to chop away. Got to chop the tree down.
I think it's great for the rivalry. I do.
But anyways, I will say Iowa's secondary is better. Iowa's secondary is better than Iowa State's. I would say the safeties are probably pretty close, but Iowa State might have the edge at safeties. But corners, Iowa's corners are definitely better than Iowa State's. 100%.
Hey, we're better at something, Mark. Go ahead.
Iowa State's front seven is better.
Yeah, Iowa's back seven is better. There you go. You got those corners going for you, Corey. That's it.
There you go.
Otherwise, it's a rout. I don't know why it's a 4-point spread. It should be more like 20.
But the difference here, but it's not like there's like huge gaps between.
You're sounding like Jim Coyle.
I don't know.
Just so you know, you sound like Jim Coyle.
Which
But-
of these two programs? Let me ask this question. More of
After
a
the second question of the show.
Broadview rivalry. Exactly. I will ask the question about every 3.5 hours. And I thought I was going to have to ask that question every 3.5 hours to keep the conversation going, but I see that I don't. But I actually want to get in a couple questions here, even though I'm enjoying this. Is there one of these two programs that take a little bit more pride in collecting Iowa players? Who recruits better in state? I know who I believe the answer would be, but is there a greater pride among the fan base / the program in collecting Iowa talent more so than the other?
With this Iowa State coaching staff, it has evened.
I would say the pride within the programs is pretty even. Now, Iowa is historically better at recruiting in state, but that's starting to shift a little bit. But as far as pride goes, I think both programs definitely take pride in getting Iowa kids on the team. I think.
Yeah, but that wasn't the. I mean, listen,
it wasn't the case. It wasn't the case under Rhodes at all.
No,
Rhodes didn't prioritize Iowa kids at all. But Matt Campbell has been slowly getting a lot more and more Iowa kids.
And Dan McCarney did okay. I don't know. Yeah. Gene Chizik was like a blip on the radar. Right?
It's weird because Gene Chizik he didn't recruit in state super well, but he actually the two recruiting classes he did put together were actually pretty good, and they were actually probably the reason that Paul Rhodes had the early success he did because he had like AJ Klein and stuff like some really really good players in his recruiting classes. Ecleccio Semele is another one. But yeah, he didn't really prioritize in-state. Paul Rhodes, I think he tried and then just realized he wasn't winning battles and then just kind of gave up and went to go get the fourth choices out of Texas and Florida, basically. It's kind of
who's the best Iowa native on the Iowa State roster? See, the fact that he had to pause right there, Mark, that is the answer. I'm not trying to
probably Colin Newell. I would say probably Colin Newell, who's the Iowa State center, which, I mean, if you look on, I was looking at a few lists, wherever, that Tyler Linderbaum is usually pretty clear cut the best center in college football. Colin Newell is usually put number 2. Like the two best centers in college football exist in the state of Iowa, and they're playing this weekend. Trevor Downing is also an Iowa native, very, very good lineman. Ryan Vance and Jake Hummel are both Iowa natives, both very, very good linebackers. Tucker Robertson, I think, is an Iowa native. There's a bunch of good Iowa natives. They're more like the linebackers and linemen. It's not like that's where the Iowa kids show up. That's where they do.
So Levi, this is not me taking Corey's side and ganging up 2-on-1. I think this is a legitimate national perspective question on this, and this is where I come from, as you guys well know. You look at Michigan State during Mark D'Antonio. Obviously, Michigan State took the upper hand, but Michigan is the big brother in state, and Michigan State clearly the little brother, and that would take a long period of time, decades, for that to reverse. Well, the perception, which is based on reality, wins and losses, is that Iowa is a strong football program that's typically nationally ranked in the top 25 in the country, more so than not, and that Iowa State has been a 2 to 4 win program for most of its history, and then Matt Campbell has certainly changed things. So is there a Auburn, Alabama, Michigan State, Michigan dynamic within state inferiority complex for Iowa State?
Yes.
There are remnants left of it. I think it's diminishing, especially as Iowa State's been good. It exists. It does, and it is a carryover from when Iowa State was true. When especially it really carries over from the 90s when I was on their long win streak, like 15 wins in a row or something like that in the series. It carries over from that when Iowa State was really bad. Iowa was winning, and that's all. That is legitimately the only thing they cared about, was beating Iowa. If they beat Iowa, that was good enough. We're obviously way past that now, as far as where Iowa State is. So there are still older fans, especially, that still do kind of hang on to that mindset just because that's kind of how they grew up. That's a lot of the meat of their Iowa State fanhood is still based in that. I'm not going to lie and tell you that we don't care about the Iowa game. And I think Iowa fans that tell you that they don't care about the Iowa State game, it's nonsense. Everybody cares a lot about this game. And no matter which side tells you that they don't, it's silly to pretend that they don't. It's a rivalry. It is. It's an extraordinarily heated rivalry, and it's getting hotter. And so there are remnants left of this kind of the little brother complex where we feel like we have to show up older, big brother to do this forever. I don't really see Iowa State and Iowa as little brother, big brother, but that's how the complex works or whatever. And there are still remnants of it over, but I do see it diminishing.
Well,
now.
let's I don't mean.
And it all depends on what fans you come across on social media. If you come across the right group of fans, they're going to sound like little brothers, and if you come across the right fans, they're going to sound like we're equals. So it's just.
I don't want to stoke this again. I don't want to stoke the fire.
I do.
But let's. I know you do. Let's be honest here. You saying, well, it's ending. Is that what you said?
I said it's diminishing. I said it's diminishing.
Matt Campbell hasn't beaten Iowa. Like that's it until you beat Iowa, you cannot say, "Oh, we're the big brother." Like that doesn't.
No, that's not what he asked, and that's not what I said. He asked, "Is there a little brother complex?" And I said, "There is a little bit, but the little brother complex is going away. You don't have to win that game for the little brother complex to go away. You can still see yourself as growing to be equals without actually winning the game."
But he has to win. Do you agree? This is the most important game, important rivalry game as far as a Cyhawk game in the Matt Campbell era. If he doesn't win this
most important Cyhawk game,
yeah. Oh,
yeah, for sure.
If he does not win this game, like this is a much more important. Listen, it's important to both people. Or both teams. I'm not downgrading that, but I'm just saying the pressure is fully on Iowa State. Okay,
I would agree.
It was on Iowa State 2 years ago. It's even more on Iowa State this year.
Yeah,
and it would even go a step further. You brought up the Big 12.
There is a certain level that Iowa is kind of playing with house money this weekend to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, but you still got to play football. And
but what I'm saying is there's not necessarily as much pressure for them to win. Like if they don't win, they're like, oh, Iowa State finally got over the top, and it won't matter.
And this is what I want to say to Iowa fans. Like, this is how I felt about the Iowa State game my entire life. If you lose it, it freaking sucks.
Yes, it does.
Okay. If you win it, like. I'm not trying to give you the big brother crap here, but if as an Iowa fan, typically, if you win the Iowa State game, not this year, but typically, you're just like, okay, we got past that one. Let's just move on. Like I'm not usually celebrating in the streets. Like I'm not streaking through the neighborhood. That even happen.
Even when we won it in 2014 on that last second field goal, and we were bad. We were bad back then or whatever. Like we were happy that day, and you're like, oh, that's cool that we beat Iowa. I mean, even back then though, you still move on after that. I mean, it's not like you're like celebrating and having parades for weeks. And I mean, that's not even Iowa State does that. I mean, you're still just moving on to the next week because Iowa State's got a really important Big 12 schedule to write it. We go. Yeah. Well, we have 1 week and we have a vacation to Las Vegas here next week, but after that we got Big 12. So I mean,
that's a trap game, by the way. That
UNLV,
big time.
UNLV is mega trash. We're not even.
But going to Vegas right after,
it's gonna be that crowd's gonna be 80% Cyclones at least. It's gonna be a home game.
Here's what I'll say: Campbell's got to win this year. Pressure's on Iowa State.
What if he doesn't? Like if he doesn't win, then what?
Like to me, I mean, Iowa State. Let's remind everybody, for anybody that doesn't know, Iowa State hasn't won this game since the game you just brought up, 2014. That's a long time, bro. Sure. That's a long time. Like, and
it'll be one more year going to next year.
I know, but I'm just saying, at some point, we're talking about Campbell. Go ahead, Mark. You have something to say.
It's huge. It is huge, and to dispel the big brother dynamic, you do have to start winning games. You don't need to win half of them, but you need to win close to half of them, and they have not done that. But there are bigger aspirations for Iowa State. So if they lose this game, they go into Big 12 play, they get themselves into the conference championship game again and win the Big 12, then it's a tremendous historic season.
If Iowa State wins the Big 12 at, 10-2, 11-1, the Iowa game, like if they lose to Iowa, it doesn't matter. I mean, it might keep you out of the playoff, but like, I mean,
it doesn't matter.
I mean, I've already conceded the fact that
it doesn't matter for bragging rights. It still does.
Bragging. I mean, bragging rights last for a week or two, and then you talk about it again in a year, and that's
really.
But you just done saying it doesn't matter. It might keep us out of the playoff, but it doesn't matter. Like, the playoff, isn't that what we're playing for?
The difference here is that I'm already conceding the fact that Iowa State basically has to be an undefeated conference champion to get in, because it's Iowa State and it's not a brand. That's because that's how this works. Wow. Iowa State is at a built-in disadvantage for getting into the playoff. You won't get they can't get a benefit of the doubt like Oklahoma. They can't. They just can't.
I've lost some respect for this rivalry if that statement is accurate about it lasting only for a couple of weeks. I come from a place as an Ohio State fan.
Sure. Oh, I'm still gonna I would still absolutely dish it out to my Iowa fan coworkers till the end of eternity. But it's not, the bragging rights do exist between people and stuff like that. But as far as like talking about it on Twitter and stuff like that, when we're in the middle of the Big 12 season and they're in the middle of their Big 10 season, you're not going to see as much of that heat, like just on social media during the season. Interpersonal between people, like between coworkers and family members, absolutely. But it just doesn't, I don't think it will bleed as much onto social media, if that makes sense.
Next question for you, Levi. For some reason, there's more hot topics directed your way than necessarily Corey's way. Maybe it's the stability of the Iowa program versus just a wild card aspect to Iowa State in the Big 12 as it stands right now.
Yeah,
obviously. So do you don't care, despise, or desire entry into the Big 10?
Just in general, or in the context of like right now?
Well, in the context of what it would mean, which would be entry into the Big 10 for decades and decades on end going forward.
So this is a good question. It's a good question. So if Iowa State were to get in the Big 10, that's a massive win for the program. It's a huge, it's a shot of nitrous straight to a program that a little bit extra money could go a long ways. And you can get a bump in recruiting, which if Matt Campbell starts, landing, 5-6 blue, 5-6 4-stars a class, we have a different Iowa State program on our hands. So it would be a huge shot in the arm. I would love to be in the Big 10. As far as like, is it realistic? No. Well, I don't know. Probably not. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that question. That said, with this new expanded Big 12, what it's going to look like with BYU, Cincinnati, UCF, and Houston, I think it's going to be a much better conference than people are initially kind of thinking it, because it doesn't have a blue blood, but there's who can you look to in that conference that's a genuinely a bad football program? Kansas, and kind of Texas Tech, but not really, because Texas Tech has been good in the past. But I mean, the rest of that conference is a pretty, at minimum, respectable to a very good football program. It's an extraordinarily deep conference, and as long as the playoff expands, they're going to get a spot. It could have ended up a lot worse than it did for the Big 12 expanding how it did.
Absolutely. It would be the worst Power 5 conference, decidedly, though.
No, it's better than Pac-12 easily. I mean, the S&P fleshes that out. Every metric fleshes that out, that it's definitely better than the Pac-12.
Size that one up. Because I think it would put
I can actually pull up the numbers for you. I'll send them to you.
The playoff committee is either going to be working from parameters going forward with this new 12-team proposal, in which it's either decided by them or dictated to them. These are the power conferences. These are the group of 5 conferences. So you can make your delineation of the two, or they're going to be in some kind of dilemma determining how do we treat this new conference. That aside, that's for the future.
Yeah.
And you talk about an ultimate dig. I know it's no holds barred here, but taking from the Rod Farva in the chat, he's asking who Matt Campbell's going to coach for next year.
It's Iowa State.
Okay.
It's 100%. I will bet my mortgage on it. It's Iowa State.
You rent, don't you, Levi? This
is my house, baby. I'd put my mortgage on it that he's here in 2022 and 2023. I mean, I don't see
that though. Beyond that is a big question mark.
Is it though? I mean, because think about it. I mean, we don't need to get it too far, but here's where I'm at. There's a couple programs he'd leave. Ohio State, Notre Dame. We don't really actually know he would leave from Michigan. He's an Ohio dude. You can't take the Ohio out of guys. You just can't.
I don't think that will play into his decision.
I 100% think that
will
go to
Michigan.
I think you are wildly underestimating that thing. Also, Michigan, which is a better job right now, Iowa State or Michigan?
Michigan's a better job. Come on. It's a better job. It's not. I'm not saying it's a better team.
Right now. Is it a better job?
Are you asking if it's a better job or team?
So Michigan, you get to go. You make more money. That's great. You get better recruits. That's great. You deal with all the boosters. You deal with incredible expectations where if you don't win 10 games, you're on the hot seat.
But at Iowa State, happens when you take a big job. And that's the definition of a better job. It has higher expectations.
It's more stress. It's a more stressful job. You don't get to do what Matt Campbell likes to do, which is develop young players and develop teams and be a leader and develop leaders. You don't get to do that at Michigan. You don't get to do that in the NFL.
Well, I'm sure there's an amount of pressure, obviously, that Matt Campbell has to deal with at Iowa State. Why doesn't he leave there and go back to Toledo?
because you can get anything you want here. Iowa State is just a different level of money than what Toledo. We can pay him. We can get him. We can get him resources.
Michigan has a different level than Iowa State.
Sure, but the gap between the effectiveness of the money of Michigan and Iowa State is a lot smaller than the gap between the effectiveness of the money between Iowa State and Toledo. The gap between Michigan and Iowa State is a lot smaller than it is between Iowa State and Toledo. It just is.
But here's the deal. I don't see. Again, Levi, when this is over, right? When this is brought, I'm talking about the game. I'm talking about the broadcast this evening. When this is over, go to Iowa at the Voice of College Football.
Yep.
Check out a cut that we posted about this very issue. Should Iowa State join the Big Ten? How should Iowa fans feel about? And I am all for it. I'm one of the few Iowa fans who says that this is actually a good thing for the Big Ten. I know people disagree, and there are reasons to argue it. But when you said earlier that you think the Big 12 will be just fine, or they'll be better than the Pac-12 by adding, who are they adding? Central Florida, Cincinnati,
BYU, and Houston.
Houston. Okay.
That's four good football programs.
But I agree with you, but here's the problem.
Where's the USC?
Well, yeah.
See, I said there's no blue blood. You have Oregon and USC in that conference, and then who?
UCLA.
That's
UCLA's been shit for 5 years. They're not.
Yeah, but trying to play into a college football playoff and compete nationally, that's what you need. So that does separate the that's why Clemson makes the ACC.
I think that you won't get initial like just outside perception perception based respect. Big 12 will get put at number 5. I think that one will have to be a slow. You have to build that. You have to build out that reputation over years, because you don't have a blue blood where you can lean back. Well, someone beat Oregon, so they're good, and that's just how it is. Or someone beat Ohio State, and that's just they're good now, and that's just how it is. The Big 12 won't have that luxury, but it will have the luxury of a lot of good, a lot of pretty good to really good football programs. A lot of them.
But Levi, let me just finish my point here. You were bringing up those 4 teams and saying that that puts them basically above the Pac-12. I've got Iowa fans and Big Ten fans who have commented and said, no, we don't want Iowa State because it doesn't move the needle any closer to the SEC. So you're talking about, again, you're comparing what would be the top of the Big 12.
Who could they add that gets them close to the SEC though?
Oh, okay, but I'm saying my point is we're talking about what would be theoretically in this new Big 12. It would be the top of the Big 12, and Big Ten fans are saying, no, it doesn't get us any closer to the SEC. That is what I'm saying. You are on a totally. I want Iowa State here because I think they're a solid program.
Sure,
but if you can't possibly.
Well, the question was if I wanted Iowa State in the Big Ten, and I would love to Iowa State to be in the Big Ten. Whether it makes sense for the Big Ten, I don't know. It depends on what they want, and I don't think anybody knows what the Big Ten wants because they're all over the board.
But the Big 12 is in trouble if they. The Big 12 is in trouble if the only move they make in the next 2 to 3 years is Houston, BYU, UCF, and Cincinnati.
But who are you going to add beyond that 4 that's going to make you think
I don't
not in
know,
trouble?
but that's why I think that there's going to be
why do you say they're in trouble?
Well,
what are you basing
nationally Power 5 perception, college football playoff perception.
Sure.
You're not going to be able to, and I'm concerned about the Big Ten, and we got Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. I'm concerned about the Big Ten.
If you're concerned about the Big Ten, then we're talking about a different version of college football where none of this even matters because it's just a completely different world.
But Levi, you understand that the SEC is king, and the SEC just got stronger. And I know Texas has been kind of a crap team, but they're still a blue blood program, and Oklahoma is a blue blood program and has been dominant. So they just got a lot better than they already were.
Sure.
And so I want Iowa State. I think Iowa State helps the Big Ten slightly, but it does not put them on even kill with the SEC.
Right, but that wasn't the question. If I thought the Big Ten was going to be benefited by adding Iowa State, the question was, do you want Iowa State in the Big Ten? And the answer would be, yeah, that'd be great for us. It'd be awesome. I don't know if it'd be good for the Big Ten, and I don't know. I mean, it depends on what they want. But
what's strange is perception here, because what Corey just stated about Texas being crap recently, Texas is crap based on Texas standards and what we expect out of Texas, because if you look at Texas's record since Iowa State's been good, I bet if you put them next to each other, they're very similar. So Texas's crap is what Iowa State's is as their historic gold standard. It's pretty close.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I'm certainly not claiming that Iowa State's a blue blood or anything like that. I'm not.
Oh, I know you're not.
Not delusional enough to say that, but like, I would love to see Iowa State in the Big Ten. That's it. I don't know if the Big Ten, if it makes sense to the Big. It depends on what the Big Ten's priorities are, and they have different priorities than the SEC very clearly. That's why they added Rutgers and Maryland, academics and TV markets.
That was
weird.
That
but
was years ago though too.
Sure. Yes. 100%. But we do know that academics matter to the Big Ten to some capacity. Whether how much they matter, who knows? And we know that they don't matter in the SEC at all. So they have different priorities. They may be wanting to do something different. And we don't know what we don't know what this sport looks like in 10 years or even 5 years necessarily. The SEC could decide to just take their ball and leave, and then they go play for their own national championship, and the rest of college football does their own thing, which I think that would be a terrible move for the SEC, but that's just me.
And to answer those Iowa fans who say that adding Iowa State to the football equation doesn't move the conference any closer to the SEC, they are right, but they are also wrong in this standpoint. Financially, based on all the estimations that are out there, I don't know that any of them are founded in anything factual, but just guesses. They're guesstimates that the addition of Iowa State and let's say Kansas to Big Ten football and then distributing the revenue between 16 instead of 14 doesn't move the needle and may actually take away from the remaining the current schools. But at the same time, if we're looking competitively on the field, if Iowa State reverts to what it's been historically, obviously it adds nothing to the Big Ten and just becomes another Rutgers or Maryland or somebody. But at the other side, if whether Matt Campbell stays or Matt Campbell has built something that can be sustained by somebody else and move on into the future, then the Big Ten is adding a program that could finish in the top 4 or 5 in the SEC out of 16 teams. That is a legitimate top 15 to 25 team year after year.
Matt Campbell is valuable to this equation because if Iowa State were to go to the Big Ten and Matt Campbell's still here, the odds of him leaving for anywhere are basically zero. I mean, not anytime soon.
That's a bit hyperbolic, but here's what I'll say.
Is it? I mean, if Iowa State's in the Big Ten,
anywhere. So if Nick Saban retires and Alabama offers him, you're saying, no way.
Maybe, but it's a hypothetical, okay. and Matt Campbell has turned down the NFL. Like, why would you go to Alabama if you're not going to go to the NFL?
Those reports have been debunked slightly, Levi. The reports that Detroit offered him a
how about the other 3 years before that? That's
I don't know.
It's silly to say that he's never been.
I don't know, but I'm just saying.
We know that. Okay. Anyways, that's
a different discussion.
Anyways,
but here's let me just finish this one point, Levi. As far as it relates to Iowa State joining the Big Ten, all right, it's not
going to happen. I mean,
well, I think it might. They're an AAU school. They fit in the. I mean, we're hearing. We've heard rumors that Kansas has joined the Big Ten, which I don't want Kansas. I'm very outspoken about that because Kansas right now, as dominant as they've been in basketball, they're a mess.
The football program is terrible.
Standpoint.
Now, they do have Lance Leopold, so Kansas, they could get to like a bowl-ish type team sometime in the next 5 years, but they're not a good football program. No.
Yeah, I mean,
they're not one you care about to add. Like, we're gonna get Kansas football. Like, no.
Here's my thing. I think Matt Campbell, if Iowa State does not join a Power 5 conference, okay, or they don't somehow salvage what the Big 12 has been, I don't see any way Matt Campbell stays in in Ames.
Based on what? Based on what?
What reason would he have to stay if
because he likes being here. He gets a blank check to do what he wants. He gets unlimited freedom to run the program how he wants. He can clearly win football games. What's it like if you have in the Big 12 that is whatever, say it's not Power 4 if you move it to that, but it's clearly better than any G5 conference by a mile or whatever. It may not be as good as the Big 10 or the ACC because the ACC has Clemson, but they can easily compete with the Pac-12 every year as far as just overall conference quality. I genuinely, and the numbers flesh that out too. Bill Connolly did a big thing on it with his S&P Plus.
Add those 4 teams and they compete with the Big 12 every year, or Pac-12, excuse me.
Yeah, easy.
Okay.
I don't think people realize how terrible the Pac-12 is below Oregon and USC.
Let's remember that the Pac-12 has not been a consistent player in the playoff. So even if you're comparing
but
the Pac-12,
are we both on working under the assumption that the playoff is expanding?
If
you're not, then this is a different conversation. If you're not, But I'm working under the assumption that they go to a minimum 8, maybe 12.
Yeah, well, but
Because if we're going to 8 or 12, then especially if you're going to 12, then power conference designation doesn't matter because they're gonna get somebody in. They will.
But is my point making sense that if Matt Campbell is in a, I know you
they have a shot at the
Pac-12,
playoff, he'll be there. He's not going.
I don't think they have a legitimate shot year in and year out in that conference. I don't.
In the new Big 12?
In the new Big 12, unless there's other major changes. And that's not my knocking.
Based on
I'm not trying to knock him. I just think I think that Iowa State fans should be soiling themselves with the idea of this. Again, I know the alliance was a lot of talk.
It's a bunch of bullshit is what it is.
Well, you say what you, I mean, I
sorry, I didn't mean to cuss on your show, Mark, but
it was a bunch of fluff. Okay, is what it was. All right. I'll use a nice word. It was a bunch of fluff during that news conference. But here's what it did. As we know, it left the Big 12 off in left field. And that should be, I would be concerned if I'm an Iowa State fan, not only from the status of my program, being able to obviously financial incentives in the future, but also playoff incentives and Matt Campbell. I just think that's.
I think that there's a lot of people outside of the Iowa State sphere that have this idea of what Matt Campbell is, what he prioritizes, and what he cares about that is so far off of what he cares about and what he.
I think he's very loyal. I think if he's, this is what
I think money does. I think money genuinely doesn't matter to him.
If he were to join the Big Ten, I could see him becoming the next Kirk Ferentz as far as loyalty to Iowa State, and that's a compliment.
If Iowa State goes to the Big Ten, he's not going anywhere.
I agree with that. I think that's right. Well,
even in the Big 12, there's a lot of reason to believe in the Big 12, and a lot of people that are familiar with the situation that have also postulated that even in this new Big 12, where it's kind of a Power 5 adjacent, even if you want to call it that, where it's definitely closer to the Power 5 than a G5, and they have and a one loss or an undefeated conference champion has a shot at the playoff. If that is the situation, the idea of turning Iowa State into the team that wins the Big 12 half the time is very appealing.
Okay. Well, I think going back to it, your comment about them joining the Big Ten, saying that there's 0% chance that he ever leaves, that's not realistic.
If I was in the Big Ten,
0%.
I'm okay. I'm exaggerating.
Yes, you're exaggerating.
Okay, I'll give it 3%.
Yeah, I don't. Well, yeah, I don't know about the odds, but I think there's a great chance that he sticks there a long time because I do believe he's turned down NFL offers. I was kind of just throwing you that bone to let you.
And he's been offered a lot of big time college football. He's been called about getting a lot of bigger college football programs: Tennessee, Florida State, Arkansas, USC.
Tennessee, I think
everybody.
Tennessee was legitimate. I don't follow it as much as obviously
he hasn't picked up anybody's phone call. Like, has he even interviewed?
I don't know.
He hasn't interviewed anybody.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is they need to join the Big Ten. I think Iowa fans should be okay
I would love
with it.
to.
And the other reason, and again, if people haven't seen that segment of mine, but the other reason I think it's important or it's a good thing for Iowa is because it does open up another spot on the schedule. Iowa fans for a long time have talked about dropping the Iowa State game, which at this point is not a good idea because Iowa State is strong. But if Matt Campbell leaves, and obviously Iowa's only locked into the series till I think 2025, which is also the end of the Big 12 contract, as I understand it, although that could change. Then I can see Iowa State. I don't take joy in saying it because it doesn't help Iowa, but I could see Iowa State taking a big step back, Levi. And I don't think you could argue that if Matt Campbell leaves, this is not blue blood in the sense that you're going to be able to pick up the pieces in a couple of years potentially. And we've seen Michigan.
Well, there's a whole bunch of assistants right below him that are the exact same philosophy. They would if Tom Manning took over tomorrow, it would be the same program. I mean, like it would philosophically, culturally be the same program. It wouldn't change, and they would have
Well, philosophically, but if Seth Wallace took over Iowa, that doesn't mean they're going to be as good. Like that.
Right. And Matt Campbell would probably take some assistance with him. Who knows? I mean, that's an impossible situation to figure out. But it's also not a situation. Put it this way: Matt Campbell is not going anywhere anytime soon. I mean, maybe, but like, there's no reason to believe. There's so many data points that show that he's not like just. I would say it is not a stepping stone job to him. It's just not. You can keep painting Iowa State. Everybody can keep painting Iowa State as this trash. Not you. This is a general rant. Because I'm tired of it over the last month. This last month has burned out my patience on this because ESPN is now coming to game day to fish for freaking views after calling Iowa State just a giant pile of garbage for the last month and the rest of the Big 12. I'm tired of it. And just because other coaches are money hungry, they're jumping jobs, they're doing with their PJ flecking some stuff or whatever, they're doing that kind of stuff. That does not mean that is what Matt Campbell is. And yes, he is against the trend. I get it. And you want to play with the trend and it makes sense to predict future outcome based on large data patterns. I get that. I think it's been established now that Matt Campbell's a different cat. He just does things his own way. He does not prioritize the same thing other coaches prioritize. And we're also seeing, it's worth noting, we're also seeing a pattern of younger coaches not bolting for bigger jobs. Luke Fickell's a great example. He could have had a ton of offers. He's still in the G5 at Cincinnati. Now he's going to be moving up to a power conference. But so that's huge for him. That's huge for Cincinnati because that could keep Luke Fickell in Cincinnati for a long time. And Lord help me, I'm really looking forward to a long time Campbell Fickell rivalry between Iowa State and Cincinnati. I think that'd be awesome. That'd be a really cool rivalry. There's a lot of evidence now that coaches are starting to realize that the grass is not always greener at the blue blood program. It's just not. Well, sometimes it is, but not always. And they're realizing that there's so much more to go into that than just taking a bigger paycheck and I have more resources, therefore everything's going to be hunky dory. Well, Steve Sarkisian found that out when he went to USC, that it doesn't always work out. Now he had his own personal demons and stuff like that he seems like he's gotten taken care of.
I would say it worked out for Gene Chizik.
Kinda. Then he got fired right after that.
He did win. He
won a title, no doubt. Yeah. But he had a generational player in Cam Newton, and then immediately got fired 2 years later. Yeah. So Gene Chizik is a classic example of how that doesn't work out. Outside of that one kind of freak data point with one of the worst national champions.
I would say most coaches though, if they were told before they started their head coaching tenure, wherever it would be, if they could take, a series of average seasons versus one national championship, I think most would take the Natty.
Maybe, but if he had, I'm not saying the Gene Chizik would have won a national championship at Iowa State, but he went and won a national championship and then was promptly fired 2 years later. I don't know how you get fired 2 years after a national championship, but he did it because he's a terrible coach.
Yeah.
And
you go 3-9.
Right. That's how you do it. That is exactly how you do it. And the point here, though, is that Campbell clearly prioritizes things differently. And anybody that claims to know it, to know his inner motivations, is probably selling you something that you don't want to buy. There's probably selling you snake oil because Matt Campbell's circle is incredibly tight. There's a lot of Iowa State people that don't exactly know everything that goes on with him. The dude doesn't have an agent. If you care about money, you hire a goddamn agent. But you don't, he doesn't have an agent. He negotiates his own contracts with his wife in the room. It's a family negotiation contract. That's how the Iowa State contract was worked out. The dude he's I don't know. He's a unicorn.
Did you say he negotiates the contract with his wife?
Literally Jamie Pollard flew to Toledo, Ohio and negotiated the contract with Matt Campbell and his wife in the room. Okay. I know it said that kind of weird, but I get that. But everybody keeps trying to sell Matt Campbell off to, he's going to Arkansas, he's going to USC, he's going to Tennessee, he's going to Florida State. He's not. He's just not. And Ohio State's not opening up for, 4 decades. Ryan Day's going to be there forever. He's really good. He's really young. He's going to be there forever. Brian Kelly doesn't look like he's leaving anytime soon. And they've already named a guy. Sounds like they've already maybe named a guy, an internal guy that is a planned successor for him. And, the other one is Michigan, I guess. And there's arguable about how attractive that job actually is. And I never said Iowa State is Matt Campbell's dream job, but also it didn't say it's not. It just depends. Everyone's got different dreams. It just depends. Why does the dream have to be winning a national title at Alabama? Wouldn't it be cooler to win one at Iowa State? Isn't it objectively cooler to win a national championship at Iowa State than at Alabama?
For sure.
Exactly. And yeah. I genuinely believe that down to his bones, Matt Campbell believes that he can do it. And by God, he's trying his best to prove that he can. And I'm not saying he's close to it, but he's put himself on the path to making that happen at some point. And that's the key thing to remember is Matt Campbell thinks it would be super cool to turn Iowa State into a blue blood.
It would also be super cool if Bishop Sycamore were a real school, but they're not. So
That's
it's like
not even the same thing at all. So
well, I'm just saying, like, lots of things are cool, but if they don't have a very good likelihood of happening, then you cannot blame Matt Campbell if he looks one day and says,
Iowa State going to a Big 12 title game 5 years after going 2-10 was unlikely to happen.
Yeah, it's impressive, but I'm just saying, like, in 6-7 years, they haven't been anywhere close. Like, they've won, 10, 11 games.
But why are we assuming that the only
basis.
thing that matters is a national
They've
championship?
not won 10 or 11 games.
No, I'm just saying theoretically. If
okay.
I'm giving
there's
them
probably
the
a good
benefit of
argument
the
to be
doubt
made
here.
that had they played a full schedule last season, they would have. But
I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt here. Well, they would have had to play Iowa, so there's another loss. But
they would also play a group of 5 teams. So it's
I'm giving the benefit of the doubt here. I'm just saying if in 6 or 7 years he somehow has, even on a biannual basis, won 10 to 11 games there, and they haven't been able to make a playoff, I don't blame Matt Campbell for saying, "Hey, the USC job's open," or the Ohio State job.
I don't think that matters as much to Campbell. I think he appreciates the hard road there. I think he would rather, if he's getting to that 10, 11 wins, I think he is more concerned. I think he would feel disappointed based on what I know about Matt Campbell in the few conversations that I've had with him. I get the impression that he would rather try to break through that and figure out how to break through that barrier than take the easy way out and go to a blue blood and just punch through it easy because they have all the resources in the world. I genuinely believe that how Matt Campbell is wired. I think he absolutely detests the idea of taking the easy way out. I think he really hates that.
Corey,
now, go ahead.
Basically, we could take this same conversation at Corey and rewind it, I don't know, to 2005, 2010, when Kirk Ferentz was a hot commodity and a much younger man. Why did he not leave Iowa when he had a small percentage chance of winning a national championship there versus going somewhere else or going to the NFL?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I do believe that there's a good chance Matt Campbell will be loyal to Iowa State. I'm simply saying that to say, well, there's no reason at all. I mean, I would not have blamed Kirk Ferentz had he chosen to leave.
Sure.
Okay, but he didn't. All right. But I'm just saying the idea that there's just it's not possible that's ridiculous.
Well, it's always, of course it's possible. But
here's the other thing. Kirk Ferentz stayed in a Big Ten conference that is steady, all right, and that is secure, especially in 2005.
I think you're probably overweighting how much that matters to Matt Campbell and to head coaches in general.
But that's my point. I'm saying those are not apples to apples because I'm talking about theoretically if the Big 12 falls apart, and I think falling apart is you lose your two powers and you add a bunch of power group of 5 schools. If that happens,
BYU is not a G5 school. I mean, kind of, but not really. The BYU is a good program.
Yeah. Well, do they move the needle? Is all I'm saying, and I don't think they
TV
do.
viewer wise, they're right up there with the top end of the conference and success. They have a national championship in the last 30 years or whatever. They are consistently a 9-10 win type of team. There's no reason to believe that they can't do something like that in the Big 12 and be a consistent top 15 team.
Levi, I've got a video for you to watch. It's called 1984 Disputed National Championship.
I'll have to take a look at it. I wasn't alive for that. So
it's about the BYU national championship.
Okay?
I'm partially kidding, although I do have a
I think we can all agree that BYU is generally
championships, and that would be one of them.
I think we can agree that BYU is generally a pretty good football program. Like that's generally a good football program.
A good football program. I would put BYU on the level of I was going to say Minnesota. I don't think
I was going to say Oklahoma State. I would put it at Oklahoma State.
Really?
Yeah.
See, BYU to me this past season, because of COVID, their schedule was torn to shreds. They had to revamp the schedule and construct a schedule out of nothing. That was a garbage schedule. It was one at the it was the worst schedule in the country. Not their fault. They had to piece together a season. Sure. They go 11-1, have a number 1 draft pick at quarterback. But basically, BYU in the last 20 years has been 8-5, 7-6, playing a quasi group of 5 / Power 5 schedule. So I don't want to overestimate BYU. They've been a top 40 to 50 program.
I think they're
maybe.
Yeah. I mean that's probably fair. But I think the prospectus for BYU is a solid add to the conference. I mean they're an upper half football program in the conference. Houston has been good here and there. I think they're okay right now, if I remember correctly. But they've had their moments here and there. UCF looks like they're on the rise, and jumping to a power conference could be a big boost for them. They're putting a ton of money into that football program.
That's your wild card. Gold nugget.
UCF is a play for 2030. UCF is assuming in 10 years they can be a power. Cincinnati has been good for a long time. They can continue to be good in the Big 12. They're going to get a boost. The big Cincinnati might be the best football program out of any of those. They can they can easily be a consistent top 20, top 15 team in the
Houston,
Big 12.
I don't believe does anything.
I wasn't in love with Houston. I thought that I would have preferred to add Boise State. I thought that would have been a better football ad.
I don't think that does anything though, too, as far as moving the needle. Boise State.
What do you define as moving the needle?
I'm talking a recruiting base, a team that has a recruiting base that is able to compete nationally. UCF, I think UCF has it, but Boise State,
Cincinnati does too.
Well, that's where Houston and Boise State bring
Houston's recruiting base. Yeah.
But
Boise State is in the middle of nowhere and has no television market and has no recruiting footprint, but they've been the best.
They've been good for a
program
long
over the last 20 years. By far, they have been the gold standard, not necessarily right this second, but over the last 20 years, where Houston is hit or miss, hot and cold. They've had their run. They won a Peach Bowl, beat Florida State 6-7 years. They have those spurts when they have a Tom Herman, Kevin Sumlin, Dana Hogerson at times where they can do something, and they're sitting in an NFL city, so nobody cares about them, but they've got one of the great recruiting areas in the country, but nobody goes there. They leave, then they go to Texas and Texas A&M and elsewhere. But if they're now in a major conference,
you can change the equation.
Keep some of those guys.
Yeah, Houston wasn't my first choice, and I like I said, I from a football product, I think Boise State would have been a better ad. Yes, they're not in the recruiting base, but they're a high quality football program, and putting them into Power 5 probably gets them a recruiting bump too, so they become a little bit better.
I think the SEC moving in, this is my thing, and I could be totally wrong on this, but I think the SEC moving into Texas now hurts Houston.
They've already been in Texas, though. I mean, they've had Texas A&M for 10 years.
Yeah, but I'm saying really kind of taking over Texas. I mean, because
they kind of already
now
have
the tide has turned to where
Alabama and Ohio State have been going in and raiding DFW for 5-10 years now. I mean, yes, there's a team in today. Yes, they have multiple teams in Texas now, but to pretend that the SEC wasn't in Texas, I mean, the SEC has been in Texas. Ohio State's been in Texas. Everybody is in Texas. If you don't recruit Texas, you're making a mistake. Because even the fifth choice guys in Texas are still Power 5 quality.
I'm not going to be claim to be an expert on Houston. I don't know.
Houston has a ton of prospects. I mean, they're
a good program.
It's probably the single that metro is probably the single best recruiting hotbed in the country.
And let's remember, Houston's
there was a statistic when Houston had that good run with Sumlin, then Hogerson, and beat Florida State in a Peach Bowl and finished in the top 10 in the country. There was a ridiculous statistic that there was no player on that roster outside of something like 45 or 50 miles from the heart of the city. They didn't have to go anywhere.
Houston is a crazy recruiting base. I mean, that's if you are only picking up Houston for recruiting, it's actually not a bad ad.
I just think you need you need a blue blood in order to elevate. If they can add Houston and
but I mean, how could the Big 12? There's no blue bloods left for the Big 12 to add, unless there was some crazy like Big 12 Pac-12 merger. But I think there's a difference though, and what makes this so hard to project though is we don't know what makes a conference valuable in 10 years. We don't really know. I mean, we have an idea. We don't know is it what's going to make people watch? Is it? I mean, are we going to be looking at streaming numbers in 10 years? Is cable going to be basically out the door in 10 years? Are we going to be making a resurgence back to cable? What the viewership look like and how that drives conference realignment and how that drives perception. It's hard. It's really hard to predict because everything is in such flux right now. But what the Big 12 can offer with this new conference, and I think it would have been even a little bit more enhanced by swapping out Boise State for Houston, is you can offer what is probably the most fun conference in the country. There's a lot Boise State would have been a really cool partner to add with BYU. That's a natural rivalry right there. You can put in Iowa State and Cincinnati and West Virginia are natural rivals right there. Iowa State and Cincinnati have played in a bunch of stuff in basketball and stuff like that too. West Virginia is right there with Cincinnati. Central Florida makes that a nice little it's geographically not super close, but it kind of makes a nice division there where you got some really fun football programs. You're still going to have, you don't have Oklahoma anymore, but you still have a lot of really fun Big 12 teams that are in there as far as the offenses go and stuff like that. You have a lot of it's fun is what the Big 12 can sell. Is yes, you can't sell that you have 100 blue bloods in the same conference, but you can sell this conference is super entertaining. There's still a lot of really good teams. There's still a lot of really good players, and it's going to be a really entertaining brand of football to watch. And that's what the Big 12 can sell. They're going to have to build that over time because you don't have a blue blood. But that is something that can be sold over time with the right marketing and with the right media deals and things like that.
I think UCF is the real commodity there. They get you into Florida in terms of recruiting. Orlando's a major market. UCF is a huge school. It's one of the 5 largest schools.
They've got like 60,000,
the alumni base is crazy. And then, of course, the entertainment connection to Orlando. They've proven that they're committed to winning in football.
Right. UCF and Cincinnati, I think, they're 2 really, really nice ads. BYU is a good ad just because their floor is pretty high as far as what value they have. The floor is very high with BYU. You could argue about the ceiling, but the floor is pretty high. Houston is largely recruiting based. They're a Texas team. Texas legislature will probably get involved. That's all that. There's a lot of politics involved with Houston. But that's what they're going to, that's the Big 12's path forward, is branding themselves. This is the most entertaining conference in college football. It doesn't necessarily have the blue bloods, but it's one that you're going to have fun watching, even if you're not a fan of the teams.
So they're the most entertaining conference. I don't want to just continue on this forever, Mark.
Sure.
They're the most entertaining conference after losing Oklahoma and Texas.
Texas is not entertaining to watch. I don't know if you ever watched Texas.
I'm just asking. That's what you said. You said that they're the most.
As far as
the most.
Levi, you understand that statement is the most subjective statement.
100%. Well, what's entertaining? And people
live stream. Yeah, exactly.
Are SEC fans and Big 10 fans that say the Big 12 has no defense now, are they going to care about it? No, probably not. But fans that care about like entertaining football games that have scoring or that back and forth, that have intense rivalries, whatever it is, the Big 12 will have plenty of that to sell. It's just a matter of you got to convince people, or you have to be able to get marketed out there and show that that Iowa State, Cincinnati, or that Oklahoma State and BYU is a game is a game that's really worth paying attention to.
I can't get a hold of the term entertaining football if you're talking about tradition rich and you're talking about talent, then I'm going to point you toward the SEC and the Big Ten.
Sure. But sure.
I get your point. You're talking about an intangible you can't really grasp, but in your eyes and your views,
that's why I was trying to use the word fun. I was trying to use the word fun instead of entertaining, because entertainment is such a, and well, fun kind of is too, but as far as subjectivity, entertaining is, because entertaining means something to a lot of different things.
Well, the entertaining standpoint would be the scoring, right? But the scoring has been compressed, and I can't tell Big 12 scores from any other scores across the country, and that's a credit to the Big 12.
It's almost like the Big 12 plays defense.
The Big 12 does play defense.
I've had they don't.
Who says they don't? Are you shitting me right now? Every Iowa fan.
I'm about to pull Stephen A. Smith and walk out of this. This is ridiculous. Iowa's claiming that Iowa State doesn't play. That's
not an Iowa State.
I'm going to say the same thing I said to Jim Coyle last week.
The Big 12 doesn't play defense as a conference.
There may be a faction of Iowa fans that say stupid things to hear their voice or to hear their own heads rattle, right?
Yeah.
Or but I have never said
every
that.
Fan base has those. Yeah.
I have never made that comment. All right. Now the Big 12.
Well, yeah,
in the past,
you sound like a very level-headed Iowa fan, so I will credit you for that.
Appreciate that. So the past 5 to 10 years, the defense has left much to be desired, but it has gotten better.
10 years, yes. 5 years, it starts to diminish. Especially like 2019, we saw a real nice defensive renaissance with Iowa State has a good defense, Baylor had a good defense, Oklahoma has a good defense now. Obviously, they're leaving, but
Baylor's also had piss-poor defenses, but
they have, but Baylor's been a good defensive team since probably 2008, really since Matt Rule took over, and even now with Dave Aranda, they have a good defense. Oklahoma State has a good defense. Texas has a pretty solid defense. West Virginia had a very good defense last year. Texas Tech is underrated. I know they're pretty good. They're decent. The only defense in the conference that you look at like they suck is Kansas. Kansas State's had a good defense for a long time.
Well, they suck in every category. So
right, that's why Kansas is like. They're such an outlier that it's almost not even worth including them.
Yeah. Let me just I just want to make one more final. I want to clear up how my viewpoint on the whole expansion thing.
Sure.
UCF, I do agree. UCF is the best ad of those 4. I still don't think it moves. It moves it a little bit. I don't think it moves it that significantly as far as the needle towards the rest of the Power 5 conferences, including the Pac-12. Now, Houston, I think it's a good ad. I don't think it does anything to move the needle.
It's just recruiting. It's just a recruiting ad.
You have a good basketball program as well at Houston, or I should say excellent basketball program.
Not that it matters, but that would probably be the best basketball conference by. I mean, because you're adding because UCF sucks, but Cincinnati.
Yeah, what is UCF?
Nothing, but Houston's a good one. BYU and Cincinnati has a good.
Cincinnati has been trash these last
couple of years, but historically Cincinnati's a very good basketball program.
Yeah, I know, but since Mick left for you, I'm just saying they're a good program, and then you add BYU, who I think is a solid ad, but I just don't know. Again, you and I see this differently, and that's fine. I don't see they need one or two major teams. They need Oklahoma and Texas. That's what
it depends on if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Because if you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and you're trying to keep up with the SEC, you're going to lose. The Big Ten can't win that game. They could add Oregon, USC.
They have a more realistic chance in the Big 12.
They do, but they don't really have a good chance at it because if the SEC is like, we want a USC. Guess who's going to the SEC?
Well, again, this alliance was a lot of fluff, but you've got Clemson in the ACC.
It's a voting block, basically.
You've got Clemson in the ACC, which is a power. Okay.
Right.
Oregon's a power in the Pac-12. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State.
I mean,
I know
Michigan
you don't want to throw
kind
UCLA in the mix. But
UCLA's just been
Miami.
Miami.
Florida State.
So I think
Florida State doesn't have the weight. I don't think Florida State has the weight now that it did 5 to 10 years ago.
If you look at all of those top-tier teams together, they are right there with the SEC, in my opinion.
I mean,
look at those top
tier.
teams. I'm not saying they're all going to merge.
Pull away the top tier and then look at what the rest of the conference is.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't we say that? I mean, I think we
could say that about anything. You are correct, which is why, like, when I was hearing all this last month about, well, you take Oklahoma and Texas away and the Big 12 isn't nearly as good. Well, yeah, of course, you take Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State away from the Big 10, and that's not a great conference.
They're not. But the difference is, Levi, Oklahoma and Texas are leaving. That's why fans are saying that. Ohio State, Michigan are not leaving the Big 10.
But you're assuming here that the Big 12 is trying to keep up with the Joneses, that they're trying to compete with the SEC.
No, I'm just saying what you just got done saying about how you get irritated people saying, well, if Oklahoma and Texas are leaving. You get why people would say that, because that is happening.
Right. I know. I'm not saying the Big 12 is going to be better than it was before. I mean, you could argue it's deeper. It'll be deeper than it was before because it'll have more good teams.
I would say I didn't realize it until it actually happened and was announced that losing Texas and Oklahoma is a bigger blow to the Big 12 than any two programs would be to any other conference. If the Big 10 lost Ohio State and Michigan, Penn State, Iowa, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Minnesota,
sure,
even Nebraska from a financial standpoint, facility standpoint, brand name, etc.
Competitively would not.
I think what's getting lost here is that you're saying that I'm trying to I'm not trying to compare the Big 12 with the Big 10. Obviously, the Big 10 is in a better spot. Obviously, the SEC is in a better spot. You could argue the ACC is obviously in a better spot. Pac-12 is more arguable because after Oregon, that conference is pretty sketchy. But being the fifth best Power 5 conference is still a power conference in an expanded playoff, which I think pretty much everybody assumes it's going to happen at some point, and it's going to go to probably 8 or maybe 12. The power designation it becomes less and less important the more teams are in the playoff. If you are the fifth best Power 5 conference and you have a 1-loss or an undefeated conference champion, they're going to get in. And
well, based on the proposal, it doesn't matter. They are going to get in even if they've got 4 losses.
Right. And that's the point, is that a conference champion, if there's auto bids, even a Big 12, even if it's considered wide, far and away the fifth best Power 5 league, great. They can put a team in the playoff. And you know who's going to be perfectly happy with dominating a Big 12 and getting into a playoff every 2-3 years? Matt Campbell. He's going to be totally fine with that. And we'll be fine with that.
Why do we spend this is Cyhawk week. We spent the last 30 minutes talking about how...
Because we can't talk about Iowa State on a national podcast without speculating that Matt Campbell's leaving. That's the rules. It's like George Niang and the Nerlens Noel bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. So any word here, Levi, about guest picker? Is it going to be Carson King? Who's the guest picker?
It's going to be something stupid, probably. If it's not Carson King, it's going to be someone that has no connection.
George Niang or some clown from Iowa State.
As far as if it was going to be an Iowa State person,
Why
the
not
only
just have
two
Matt
people.
Campbell? Why not just have Matt Campbell run up there?
If it was going to be a specific an Iowa State person, it would probably, if it's not Carson King,
Jamie Pollard.
it would probably be either Seneca Wallace or Tyrese Halliburton.
Is it so? Is Seneca? So Seneca is the franchisee at Wingstop here in Ames.
Correct. He owns a couple. He owns like one in Ames, maybe in some Des Moines.
He doesn't
too.
live here though.
I think he lives in. I think
Texas?
he lives in California. I think he lives in California, where he's from.
Okay.
I think. I'm not sure exactly. He owns a few restaurants around Ames and Des Moines.
So I see Big Ten Ted commented Marcus Pfizer. Would you be okay with that?
I mean, I'd be okay with it. I don't think they're going to bring him on. He's not really a public figure anymore. So I mean, Tyrese Halliburton was damn near the rookie of the year in the NBA. He's an electric personality. He now co-hosts a podcast with JJ Redick. He's a pretty visible sports figure at this point, as far as Iowa State alums go. He's probably the most visible one as far as who's in the NBA and stuff like that. Tyrese Halliburton would be an awesome guest picker. You could get Carson King, a dark horse one that there's two of them actually that I've thought were really. I like Dan McCarney. I think Dan McCarney would be pretty cool.
I love that.
He's got a foot in both camps. I think he'd be awesome. Dan McCarney is an awesome person.
He is an Iowa guy though. I mean,
he's an Iowa grad, coached at Iowa State for a long time. Yeah, I mean,
but I think he bleeds black and gold first and foremost.
Whatever.
I'm just saying. I think he does. I think Don Patterson, who coached with him, would agree with that. But go on.
Maybe, but he coached at Iowa State for a long time too. Whatever. It doesn't matter. The one name that I have heard thrown around a little bit, I don't know how realistic it actually is, but Jason Momoa, because he's a native of Norwalk, which is right by Des Moines. Essentially, he's essentially a Des Moines native. Obviously, big, huge movie star, pretty fun guy, pretty good personality. Could be a fun guest picker for him.
Okay, and so, guest picker last year. I know.
I'm sure it'll be some random country star that nobody like.
Well, no, last week was Kane Brown, so they're not bringing in a country star this time. I don't think
they brought Eric Church last time. I mean,
was it Eric Church 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was Eric Church. Yeah.
Okay, so
which is dumb because he's got a connection to the Iowa football program, which is silly. So
he
whatever.
does.
If he does, yeah, because he's good friends with Tucker Beathard, who is CJ Beathard's older brother.
Come on, man. You're.
Anyways. I swear to God, though, if they bring on Ashton Kutcher, I'm boycotting this. They better not bring on Ashton Kutcher.
You just said it was not fair that the College Game Day brought on Eric Church because he's friends with the brother of a former.
I truly do not give a shit who the guest picker is because I'm not going to be at game day. I'm going to be too busy tailgating.
All right.
As long as they don't bring on Ashton Kutcher, he is the last choice. I don't want.
I was going to say Ashton Kutcher, Tom Arnold. I don't like Tom Arnold personally.
I don't like Tom Arnold.
Yeah,
Ashton Kutcher. Ashton Kutcher is a big name, but I don't want an obvious.
I know you don't, but it would be a good person for this because he'd get a lot of booze and he'd be great because he's a funny guy. I think it'd be bring him and Mila Kunis on here. I mean, I think that would be kind of cool.
I don't know. I don't know who it is. It's probably
come on, you'd love to see Mila Kunis up there. Levi, that's not.
I'm not even gonna be out there, and I'm probably not gonna watch it. I wasn't at it in 2019. I didn't watch it.
Okay.
I didn't, especially right now with a lot of the Iowa State fan base being pretty lukewarm towards ESPN at best. I mean, I'll be curious to see how rambunctious the crowd is on Saturday. I'm sure they will because it's national TV, it's game day, all that. But there is a very real feeling of disdain for ESPN among not just Iowa State, but pretty much every Big 12 fan base besides Oklahoma and Texas.
All right. The quality football discussion has given me some patience to sit through the discourse about the guest pickers. But we
hey, this is what we get excited about here in Iowa, Mark. Listen.
We could be talking about uniforms.
Yeah, God, let's talk about uniforms for a second. Did you see that, Mark? Did you see that?
The uniforms. Well, Levi gave me a preview.
Oh.
So what do you think of the white?
Well, no. You verbally gave me a preview, and then you said, okay, I can open this link, right?
I think it's just a graphic. I can send you the tweet. It's the tweet is from Cyclone Equipment.
Cyclone Equipment.
That's the Twitter. That's the Twitter account for the equipment group. Anyways, But yeah, so Iowa State's wearing white, black, white, which is always funny because the idea of wearing black against Iowa was always kind of a joke. Like, oh, that'd be funny to piss them off.
The idea of wearing black against anybody's a joke. Your colors are not black. What world are we living in here?
Everybody's colors are black. It's a neutral color.
White is a neutral color.
So is black. It is the definition of a neutral color. Anyways, it is the absence of color. And it's this whole deal because it was always a long time. Like it was truly just like a sarcastic, oh, it'd be funny to wear black against Iowa or whatever. He actually went and did it. Now we're wearing black against Iowa. And there's a lot of Iowa State fans that any Iowa State fan that likes the black uniforms is all on board with this for trolling Iowa. Because like I'd be willing to bet a good chunk of this is just to piss Iowa fans off, which it definitely did. Because there was something on Twitter. There was a lot of very upset Iowa fans on Twitter today about the idea that Iowa State would dare infringe upon their black as they don basically the Steelers uniforms.
Are you serious? So, like these are legitimate Iowa fans that care about this?
Literally hundreds of them on that responded to one single tweet.
I don't understand. Like why? What's the purpose of getting?
I'm not saying it's not silly
uniforms.
It's definitely silly, but I'm saying there are a lot of people that are very upset about this.
Possibly our question of the night comes in from Adonbe, who says, Iowa State, why is this relevant?
It's not. You don't have to watch.
Adonbe, I hope you're kidding. I hope. Adonbe joins us on a regular basis. I think they know their college football. I think. And so they're just poking the bear a little bit. I think.
So are we making picks here, Mark, or are we?
Let's do it.
Make your picks. My picks will be available on Patreon, everyone. They will be right there. But otherwise, if you two would like to make your predictions here, I would be honored. Otherwise, point people to where they can find them.
What are we doing, Levi?
Let's make picks on this thing. I'm happy to repeat my picks on my podcast tomorrow. Yeah.
All right.
You go first.
I've got Iowa State in this game. Okay. I'm not a homer. I am a homer, but I'm not letting it blur reality here. I'm concerned with quarterback still. Concerned with the offensive line. I think Iowa will be able to keep this a very low-scoring game. I'm not going to give my score prediction here. People can go over to the podcast for that, From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. But I do think it's going to be an issue. And I think I'm not the skill position stuff, the tight ends, all this, Milton, Hutch, that doesn't concern me. Breece Hall, obviously, that should concern anybody. I think Iowa's defense is going to keep them in this game. But I just worry if Iowa can't generate points defensively. And maybe they will. Maybe they will generate points defensively. That's certainly possible. And if they do that, certainly that changes things. I would love to pick Iowa. I'm going Iowa State in a close one in Ames.
Do you have a score, or are you just going to...
I'm going to leave that for my viewers to...
Fair
anybody
enough.
wants to go over to the podcast, they can get my score.
Fair enough. I'm largely in the same boat. I think as much as I would love Iowa State to win by 100, they're probably not going to. It's kind of weird because this game... The Cyhawk game is generally really low scoring, or it just will randomly jump up into the 40s for no reason at all. It'll jump up to 44, 41 for no reason at all.
Well, you do have the quarterback that just was ridiculous. What's the guy that transferred to Georgia?
He transferred Jacob Park. He transferred
from Georgia. Jacob Park. Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is the story out of that game was Dave Montgomery going bananas.
Yes.
That he was crazy that game.
And
I would say should have won that game, but because it was that crazy Akron Wadley run at the end.
Yeah.
That buried a stake in my heart. The last two games in Ames, Iowa State should have won both of them, but they didn't. Anyways, I think defenses are largely on par with each other. They do things differently, but largely on par with each other as far as overall quality goes. I think Iowa State's offense has a higher ceiling and probably a higher floor. Just because of the talent that you have at the really important positions. You get quarterback, offensive line, running back. They've got a running game that you can sit, you can rely back, you can fall back on. You can give Breece Hall 30 carries and just punch. They can do what they did to Oregon, which is what Iowa does to a lot of other people too. where you just keep running the ball and just keep doing it over and over and over and make them hate the game of football by the time the game's over. But I would say it does have some skill. It does have skill possession on the talent on the outside with Xavier Hutchinson. They've got Charlie Kohler. They've got a quarterback that has been there and done that with virtually every situation there is in defense. He could see. He can make plays with his legs. He's accurate, and if he's as calm and collected as he was against UNI, then it looks really good. And then, like we were talking about before, where I thought Iowa State held advantages at a lot of positions, but they're not a big advantage. It's a lot of small advantages here and there where you got a little bit of gap at quarterback, you have a small gap at running back, a small gap on the line, a small gap at the tight end, where it's not a big gap between Iowa State and Iowa, but there's enough of the small ones where Iowa State owns little advantages on a lot of different places. And they also are playing at home in what's going to be in front of a really, really big, loud crowd. And I think there's enough little advantages that build up in Iowa State's favor that can get them over the top and get Matt Campbell his first Cy-Hawk win. So I think it's another one. I think it's Iowa State in a close game, probably less than a touchdown. What's 4.5 right now is the line? That's
Mark. Is that four? Is that right?
I think
That's what I've seen.
About
Yes,
4.5.
4.5.
That's a tough one. If you're taking Iowa State, that's a really tough one because it's not a touchdown, but I don't know. I would be really hesitant to bet that spread. But I think I would still probably take Iowa State on the money line. I still like Iowa State in that game. I think there's just enough little advantages all over the place for Iowa State that they can take advantage of and exploit the few weaknesses Iowa does have.
Just for the record, I want to add one more thing here. For Iowa fans, yes, I did pick Iowa State to win this game, but I want to make this clear. Not saying we don't care about the game, but if Iowa loses this game to Iowa State, it does not affect them in the Big Ten. Okay, Iowa fans, we're after a Big Ten West title. That's primary. I mean, it sucks to lose the game, but it's one game. Let's remember, Iowa State has not won since 2014. So one win does not mean that Iowa fans need to hide in their mother's basement for the next week. All right, so there's that. It sucks, but they'd be losing to a very good team on the road. I'll give Iowa State that completely. So hope for the best, but I think it's going to be a close one, and Iowa State takes it.
It's been a great Iowa State preview show. That has been guaranteed from the time that I invited both of these to come on and do this. The game should be a great game and should deliver as well, but I wasn't quite as guaranteed on that. But I knew I'd have a great show with these two, with Levi and with Corey. I would encourage all of you to follow them on Twitter and follow them to their various platforms. So Levi, we make sure that we get all the correct information. You're going to explain this much better than I. Where can people find you?
So all of my Iowa State stuff is at Wide Right Natty Light. It's widerightnattylight.com. We have a YouTube channel. We've got an Instagram. We've got a Twitter, and we've got a Facebook. We're up to 2 podcasts and a YouTube show every week. We've got lots of different content for that. I have a personal account. It's Levi R. Stev. That's more non-Iowa State stuff. I'm a drummer in a band, so we've got some of that stuff going on too. So I've got lots of different stuff going on. But as far as the stuff that anybody in this chat room is going to care about, it's going to be at Wide Right Natty Light.
Corey has been doing a phenomenal job for our platform here at the Voice of College Football, both here at the main channel, the Iowa channel, the Big Ten channel. He will have post game following the game with Coach Don Patterson, and we will at least have that on the Iowa and the Big Ten channels, if not here. Corey, let everyone know where they can find you otherwise.
From the Hawkeye of the Storm YouTube. But I am really excited about these post-game shows with Coach Don Patterson. We are able to take calls. So Iowa fans or Iowa State fans, they want to, I could see a scenario where Iowa State fans are streaking the neighborhoods, and, I've got my wife ready to board up the windows if necessary on Saturday, but they'll be able to call in and talk to Don himself, ask questions, but we're going to do this week after week, not just this game. So Iowa at the Voice of College Football, and then From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. And of course, wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can search From the Hawkeye of the Storm for our weekly podcast.
Levi has inadvertently given me assignment to measure up the Pac-12 versus the new expanded Big 12. So
I think Bill Connolly did a fairly
I'm sure he did an
expanded thing
excellent
on it.
job.
Yeah.
But I will have to take that on myself because I've got to see it for myself based
There
on
you go.
past results. Good stuff from Levi, from Corey. This is, of course, the voice of college football. Invite everyone to, of course, subscribe right here as well. And we'll see everybody next time.